One of the most common questions that I get at my lectures or online even is, what is my writing process? What is the process that I go through in order to write a new book? And this brings up a lot of stuff for me because I have a core philosophy, or not even really a philosophy, but I have a suggestion that I make to everybody that is an entrepreneur, everyone that is a coach, everyone that is living an inspired life. I recommend that each person actually writes their own book. And I don't just say that haphazardly or generally, like, oh, everyone has a book in them. I really do believe that every single person has a book inside of them. And not everyone needs to publish a book, though. This is a very important understanding for you to really kind of key in on if you are actually a published author or just an author of your own life. Now, let's dive into that for a second. Everybody has a book inside of them, but not everybody has to publish a book. So what that means is that when you are going through your own unique writing process, the process of writing a book isn't to get published, right? If your goal is to get published or to be a New York Times bestseller or to sell books, you probably won't do very well with it. You have to have a deeper reasoning for why you're creating this book. And I really think that it should be for yourself first and foremost. The most successful authors long term, the books that stand the test of time, are the ones that were written for the author who wrote them, right? They were seeking something in the industry that they're in, or they had some puzzling question or whatever, and they had to fill that void, you know. I wrote my first book, The Life Food Peak Performance System, or technically, that was my fourth book. Because if we go back to the beginning, my very first book that I ever wrote that only a few people actually know about was called Activating the Superhuman. This was about a little less than a year into the process of raw living food saturation, when I was just getting into it, just entertaining the idea of being a speaker. For some reason, I got the idea that I could just write a book. Because I didn't have to go through some major publishing agency. I could actually go through self-publishing and just put it together and kind of go through the self-discovery process and figure out how to put it all together and become a published author, a legitimately published author. So I said, hey, why not? And put this little tiny book out. Wasn't edited whatsoever. It was really just kind of something I put together, and when I look back on it, even though I kind of look back a little bit with disdain, a little embarrassed, but when I do look back and I really think about it, I needed to have that experience to propel me into writing more legitimate and publishable books that are able to go out into the world and make a real difference. And the second book that I put out after that was The Life Food, or what is it? The Live It Lifestyle, Dropping Diets Forever. Some of you may remember that book. It was more of a manual-sized book. I think it was like 300 or 400 pages, something like that. And then I turned that book into what now is the Life Food Peak Performance System. And that became my first real official book, 679 pages. And something I'm extremely proud of. And then I put out the Inner Alchemy Youthening program. And so I've been through the conveyor belt, if you will, of the publishing world, the self-publishing world. And I found out that there's no one way of going about it. If you do have it in your heart to publish a book, there's all kinds of different ways to go about it. But let me bring this back to the original distinction, is that some authors are meant to publish books, some authors are meant to just write for themselves. And you'll never know which category you fit into unless you embark on the journey. So that's why I recommend that everybody starts writing a book with the intention that other people are going to read it. Right? This is a very important idea, is that in order to learn information, to really learn it and immerse yourself in it, it's important to learn information as if you were going to teach that information. So once I really got it in my mind that this book was real and this was going to go into the world and could become huge and millions of people may be looking at it, it put me into a laser focus. It dialed me in, and I really was able to incorporate all the moving parts that I had put together at that time and find a way to weave it all together, under one big umbrella. And that's how I realized that I was meant to be a published author, and actually authoring was a part of my path. It was a part of my destiny, was to be an author, and not just an author of ebooks or just kind of putting out marketing stuff to market what I'm doing, my services and my speaking and that kind of thing, but to actually leave my mark on the planet, to write books that would become classics in the field, in a diversity of different topics. As I evolve forward, I'm already thinking of new topics that aren't just nutrition related, that are delving into other areas of study, that things that catch my interest, things that I have an expertise in, and things that I feel like I can bring a novel contribution to. So you won't know what your contribution in this field is unless you really go through that process of putting pen to paper or fingers to computer and really going through that. Now, there's different ways to organize what you're putting together. And for me personally, my process is a combination of linear and non-linear dynamics. So the linear piece is the organization. That's how I basically start by creating some kind of organization, some kind of structure, but it's very malleable. It's very rhythmic. So what I mean by that is that I'll go through the process of putting a table of contents together only to give me a straightforward idea of the book that I'm creating. It's only to give me a guidepost. It's not to put me into any kind of straitjacket or to box me in any kind of way. And that table of contents always changes. It always shifts around as the personality of the book evolves. Because that's one important thing to understand, is that as you're going through this process, everything that you put onto paper is subject to change as you change. You're essentially going through a self-discovery process and a weeding out process. That's the editing process of writing your book, is that as you go through it, you're going to put all kinds of stuff down. Don't try to edit yourself in the beginning. Don't bother with all that. Just put the stuff down that you have, organize it in some kind of way, and create the structure for your book. But then as you go through it, you'll probably go through a series of iterations before you come to a final conclusion over the duration of your writing process. So allow yourself to go through that process. Don't judge yourself. Don't analyze it too much. Just go through the process of discovery, and then as you go through that process, the characteristics or the personality of your book and the voice you're giving to that book will start to reveal itself. This is important, is that you have to allow it to reveal itself. You can't force it out. This is not archaeology. You can't just excavate things out in pieces of the book out as if they were fossil records and then try to create a whole storyline around the little pieces that you think are perfect. You got to take it all as it is and then filter it out as you've matured with that masterpiece that you're creating. Hopefully that makes enough sense for you to get started and kind of dive into this. And again, there is no one way fits all process for going about writing your book. I've studied some of the great authors out there, and each one of them has a different process. So explore it, study the industry, study the different options you have with self-publishing. I find self-publishing is a great way to get started. I know for me, my books will transcend the self-publishing industry, and they will become more mainstream, and they will evolve into more of a partnership with a much bigger distribution agency eventually. But right now, they are serving their place. They're serving their role as they should, and eventually that maturation process will evolve. And you will evolve as you allow yourself to go through the process of self-publishing and finding out once and for all, are you meant to be a published author, or are you meant to simply be the author of your own life?